Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love, Shamika Michelle, and Wilfred Riley.
I want a billion fans, so I need a million first. I'm a gain another.
Hello and welcome
Stop
to
the
Cut the
sickness
Bull.
of this
I am
verse.
Charles
Even
Love,
when I'm smiling,
alongside my
sweet, looking
co-hosts,
Zuby as
Shamika
a
Michelle and Wilfred Riley. And our guest this week is Tamuira Reid. She is a liberal realist, whatever that means. We'll find out. A feminist, writer, and single mother, and associate professor of writing at NYU. Tamuira, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, it's good to have you. We invited you on to get the other side of some of the topics we regularly talk about. We had a bit of a back and forth on Twitter, and I said, well, why don't you come on and talk about that? And Will and I actually say that a lot. I don't know why Shamika doesn't do it, but we say that a lot to people, right? And then they always say fine, and then they don't. And you said, okay. So I can't speak for Will and Shamika, but I'm really glad to have you.
ever to say yes.
What'd you say, Will?
I said I think Tamuira is the first leftist writer ever to say yes, actually.
Right, and it's important because when we started, we had liberals on. We're open to have
What liberals did you have on?
Do I get to finish? She's already fired up.
I'm not.
But no, I was going to say that's the problem. We have liberals on, but they may be politically liberal.
Yeah.
But they're against the things that are loudest in the culture now. So, like you say, they don't come off as liberals. But I guarantee you, the way they vote up until that point and what they think, they will probably agree with you on a lot of things politically. They just don't like the things that are loudest in the culture, and we can talk about that.
Yeah,
but I wanted people to come on to say, I disagree with that, or I think there's other ways to address these issues. But a lot of people tweet at us or comment about the episodes with big talk, and we say, why don't you come on? And they don't. So kudos to you for doing so. So I think we should start there. You said what liberal? So explain to me why the people that I don't label, they label themselves as liberals, aren't liberals.
I mean, that was an interesting thing to actually send you. You know, I was like, what do you want? My bio? Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to send. And it was just sort of like, no, a couple sentences, you know, and I was like, okay. But then I thought about
how you describe yourself.
About the show, and I was like, I don't know that I've ever actually had to like sit with myself and like do something that was like putting myself into so many fucking boxes.
Right.
And it's a weird feeling, you know, because I'm like, I guess I'm a liberal, like I guess, like, you know, I guess I'm a feminist, like I have, you know, like I definitely think that way, but it's hard, you know. It's like I have a tendency to not want to be put into those boxes because I feel like it gets.
Do you think we do? Because I don't think we do either.
It's like I don't know. You know, I don't know you that well, but I mean, it's a very politicized show. You know, and I think
is it?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that the topics you talk about and the way it leans is definitely not like where I would end up.
But I think that's two different things, though. Whether we agree or whether it's where it ends up where you would end, is totally true, and I can understand why we'll talk about some of those issues. But I always question people when they say that. At least me, I can't speak for Will or Shamika, and they'll be able to do that. But when they say that I'm speaking politically, to me, maybe we have different definitions. Even forget about defining liberal and conservative. Even that must be different. So I say, if somebody says, "What do you think about crime?" What do you mean? Here's a case. What do you think should happen? And I tell you what I think should happen in that case. I don't think I'm making a political statement. I'm just giving my opinion on that case. So I don't think our show is political.
Oh my God.
Let's see if the other co-hosts think so. Let's start there. We're starting right off with a disagreement. Shamika and Will. Shamika, you first. Do you think that we're political?
I would say that people consider us as a political show, although I think we do try to stray from it because a lot of things that we talk about may be trending sometimes or in the news when it comes to politics. It comes across that way. But I think that we do try to make an effort to, you know, bring in the culture, you know, like especially Charles, when you talk about like fat women and stuff, that's probably more political than
You
most
talk
people.
about fat women, though, Shamika. Do you have the fat phobia? I was like,
Thank you, Tam.
gonna go
I do.
eating fast because I'm like, holy shit, I'm gonna see Shamika. She's gonna think I'm fat. And you're
I would have to see the rest of your body. I've been looking at your neck since you came in, trying to determine, but I really need to see the rest of your body.
You know what, Tam? I think she's unfair to fat people. I would give you that. I think she's unfair to fat people. But to her credit, I think in her mind, when she's talking about fat people, she's talking about fat people.
Yeah.
She's not talking about
the
normal
unspoken
fat. She's talking about
funniest part of
morbidly
this
obese.
is that Shamika was trying to size Tam, like checking for the neck and seeing like exact. I was gonna ask where you would place her, but nah.
I have the
But I mean,
neck.
first of all, I'm probably the fattest member of the panel, although I also consider myself easily the best looking, most modest, etc. But no, I mean, the whole thing of are we a political show? I mean, it depends. Like most of our topics are political.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, like, being a black conservative, quote unquote, basically means you think a lot of the U.S. race narrative is bullshit.
Yep.
That's pretty much it. And a lot of our guests relate to that topic. Like, we brought on Clifton Duncan, the actor, to talk about, like, black issues and vaccination. I don't think that my view on a whole bunch of things, from drugs to sex to the utility of violence, so on, is kind of standard conservative conventional. And I don't care whether it is or it isn't. But I mean, like, the stuff we focus on is mostly contemporary issues in society. So, like, I mean, we had Tucker Carlson as a guest. He's a notable.
I'm sorry, Will. Tam is making faces. She's rubbing her head.
There's just so many things, you know. Sorry.
I just ignore what other people are doing when I'm talking.
I'm sorry.
It's all about me.
No, I don't care one way or another. I think the show's probably going to be hilarious. But no, I mean, I think that a lot of our focus is on political issues. I mean, like, we've done a lot of CRT episodes and so on down the line. I don't think that's bad. I don't think people would pay to hear, like, Will Riley talk about basketball or something like that, or most of the things that I talk about on a day-to-day basis with friends. So,
well, I guess I am in the minority here because I don't think talking about current events make you political. I mean, you're supposed to talk. Where we going to get? I mean, when you're talking to your friends, you don't talk about the weather all the time anyway. You're definitely not going to have a podcast where you're talking about the weather or Will's talking about basketball. But because I'm talking about issues, because this is my view of what a political show would be. It would be the Republicans are terrible or the Republicans are great. The Democrats caused all the problems. Or Trump is bad. I try not to talk about Trump at all. It's not that he never comes up. We don't sit around talking about policy issues all the time. That's what a political show is. Like, what did the Democrats or Republicans do this time? Because we talk about CRT, it's because people are talking about it. And to be fair, most of the time when we talk about it, the three of us talk about what people agree and disagree with. But none of us are saying, you know, they need to take CRT out of schools, or those laws are great, or none of us are saying CRT is this. So Tam, you get 4 to 5 minutes to just rant now. So that way we can get it out, so you don't have to make your
segue was that?
Because she keeps making faces. I want to allow her to speak. No, but so
Shamika never gets 4 to 5 minutes just to rant.
No. Because you get the whole show. But Tam, but there's some structure. But there's some structure around it. I do still want you. We're going to get into your beliefs and those kind of things and where we differ. But to define what is political, and then define what is liberal. Because you even said, I don't know, am I liberal? Am I not? So kind of define what it means to you. You don't have to be, right to everyone, but what it means to you.
I mean, I think that being a Democrat, it's like, where are you on that spectrum? And when I look at Republicans, for instance, I'm like, it's a really consolidated base. Like, it's, even if I feel like that person is full of shit, like they don't really believe in that bill and they really don't want to, like they're not really pro-life, or they're not really like, want to throw like trans people under the bus or whatever, they'll get in line and they'll act like they do because it leads to them being in power, politically, their party being in power. So they're willing to make that sacrifice where Democrats aren't. you know, and I feel like for Democrats, it's less about the collective and it's more about showing your individuality and wanting to be like, I'm the outlier, or we have like 10 different groups of, you know, we have the woke, we have the progressives, we have the liberals, we have the more, you know, moderate left, we have this, we have that. And it's so divisive at this point in the Democratic Party that I don't even know where I belong within that party. You know, I'm not woke, you know, and I'm not like asleep. Like I don't like really know where I would put myself in there, except when I think about liberal, I think about, you know, I think about being, what's the word? Pro quality of life, I guess, you know, and that's kind of where I am. It's more about that, the idea of everybody has the right to live their lives as happily and as peacefully and as healthily as they possibly can. And I don't want anyone to fuck with that autonomy. You know, I don't want the body autonomy to go away. I think that we're just way too up in each other's business. And I would like a lot less politics. I feel like politics like permeate every corner of my life. You know, and maybe that's why I think your show is political, because it does talk about a lot of like heavy policy topics, regardless if that's the key, you know, driving factor or not. It gets into some of that stuff, whether it's like Alvin Bragg's or it's, you know, what are they doing in Fairfax, Virginia, or like bail reform or the subway or fatherlessness or single parenting. I mean, it's or freedom of speech. You know, it's all there on this show. And so when you say it's a cultural show, like culture and politics to me are like the same thing, you know, in a lot of ways at this point. And I sort of wish they weren't. And I don't know how to live independently outside of this highly politicized world that we're in, you know, and for my son to be so astute about politics and to know so much at such a young age, like blows my mind, because I wasn't thinking about any of this stuff at his age, you know, I was climbing trees.
So,
like,
so I just want to clarify one point, then I'm gonna go to Will, because Will made a reaction. Just one of your, it's not the only, but one of your clear distinctions between Democrats and Republicans are that the Democrats are about the individuality.
I think so. I think so. Yeah. I think that Republicans will preserve the party, you know, to no end, really. Okay. And I think that a lot of it is, you know, based on, you know, really fundamental sort of shared values. And a lot of that is, you know, Christianity, to be honest. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's been sort of a pivot and a return to that kind of taking, you know, center stage in a lot of policy, like whether that's admitted to or not, or seen or not.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think it's about, you know, the human rights, really. When I get down to it, it's like I believe in all of these things. I think people should have all of these rights, you know, and I see just so much hypocrisy on the right when it comes to all of it.
Will, what is your response to that?
Well, I mean, so my response isn't just like angry shouting or something like that. I mean, I think that everyone sees the negative characteristics that all humans have most prominently in their opponent. So, like, my immediate reaction to some of that, like, the idea that there's not a lot of groupthink on the left and liberals and leftists move independently, I mean, strikes me personally as ridiculous. I mean, just today. So, for example, I actually said something that was like traditionally second wave feminist. You know, I had to break the wall for a second. But like, I got all of these sort of left-leaning bots, like, hey, you sound like J.K. Rowling, you transphobe. And this is like the most liberal thing I said all day. And this went on for like 2 hours, just me blocking these cats and arguing with them. And I think this goes on all of the time. I mean, I think there would be far more resistance on the left to say, like, if you said something like trans women obviously aren't women, they have a mental condition called gender dysphoria, you'd hear just hysterical, down the line shrieking from the left. I actually don't find this very often on the right, unless you said something like, fuck America. You know, I mean, there are very few issues that would unify the entire, like, libertarian through, you know, black church base of what you could call the right. And I mean, the same thing. Like, I don't think, as a political scientist, actually, this is something I researched, I don't think that people that identify as leftists want less state control whatsoever. I mean, like, obviously the extreme of the right is fascism, and there are a disturbing number of people on the right that seem to have some kind of fondness for that traditional, like, blood and soil government with a king sort of thing. Like, people kind of low-key cheering for Putin. That does sometimes happen. But the extreme of left-wing governance would be communism. It would be far more comprehensive control. Like, if you look at who supported full-on COVID lockdown, not like wear your mask in public, but just shut every door, not one life, shut your small business down. Like, the further left you moved, the more people wanted that. Like, the more people accepted that the government could intervene in your life. So I think when people say this stuff, they're talking about, like, individual issues. When people on the right say, I want less government interference, they mean with gun ownership, for example. People on the left might mean with abortion or birth control. The actual level of policing or something like that that people want across blacks and whites, liberals and conservatives is very, very similar. So I think, like, I personally would prefer almost no government control and almost no taxation. I actually think if there was no state whatsoever, I'd make myself sort of a petty king and live my best life. But unfortunately, this probably is not going to be allowed to happen. But I'm on the extreme edge of what I want the state to do, which is very little. Most people on the left are way in the other direction.
Don't be controlling my mute, Tam. Go on, Will.
No, I mean, but that's it, really. Like, I think that it sounds to me insane to say that people on the left don't want government control. I mean, like, when you're talking about the CRT debate, it's generally people on the left, and this is a very specific issue, that are advocating for, like, full-on statewide curricula that, quote-unquote, teach honest history or something like that. You can support that or oppose it, but I think it would be more people on the right that would say leave that up to the individual school district. And we see that with voting rights and a bunch of other things. But again, you see the reverse on other issues, gun control and so on.
Okay.
Most people want, my last sentence, most people seem to want someone to command them. I don't necessarily think anyone in the four squares does, but I have never, ever noticed that this is less common among, say, leftist women than right-wing bros. Like, I think that's a natural human desire. And, you know, communism is as full the expression of it as any kind of fascism. So,
Yeah.
that's all I got.
Depending on where those commands are coming from.
Very true.
Yeah. So I was going to say, though, as I listened to, and can I call you Tam? Can we be like friends? Okay. Okay. So I agree with Will when you were talking about the left, you know, that sounded crazy to me as well. But as I heard you say what you believed, I don't know, you sounded a little more maybe libertarian to me. Like, I didn't really hear left except for when you were trying to defend them, which didn't come across so good to me. But I didn't really hear that, you know, you were this left-leaning person in your own personal...
Well, let's find out why. Tam, why don't you give us some specifics that you believe that you think that we don't believe?
I mean, I think it's I mean, again, within the Democratic Party, right? Like, there are certain policies that I think that...
Yeah, give me some policies.
You know, but even within those policies, we have different ideas about the structure of those policies and the implementation of those policies and the oversight of those policies. And that's what I mean by how divisive, you know, we can be. It's holding us back for sure. I mean, I everything, you know, like, I think that probably, like, where you stand on most issues, like, I'm probably the other way, you know. But I think the thing that's super annoying.
But you also say you're not woke. We spent a lot of time talking about how we just
stupid. Sorry.
What'd you say?
I think
because you think what?
I'm tired of that fucking word. Sorry, I'm swearing so much, Shamika. I know that you're.
But does that mean you don't agree with them, or you just don't like the word? She will encourage more. So are you saying you don't agree with them? Are you saying you don't agree with them, or you just don't like the word?
I think that it puts all Democrats into, like, this woke category. Like, I keep hearing, like, the woke, you know.
Yeah, but we got to hone in. Are you saying you don't agree with them? Do you agree with them?
With the woke?
Yes.
It depends, you know, like, it depends on what they're talking about. It depends on the issue, to be honest. I mean, I don't really believe that.
You're going to give me no specifics, are you?
Because it can't be so specific. That's the thing.
But it has to. I'm asking you about a specific a belief, and you can't tell me what your beliefs are.
Because, I mean, the idea of this woke person is just sort of like anything goes, right? Like, everything is fine. Like we can let everyone do what they want to do. And, you know, it's this like very bleeding heart liberal kind of like take on life. And it's not.
And you don't agree with that?
No, I don't. I think that there needs to be more structure. And I think that. Yeah.
So if we say we don't agree with it and you say you don't agree with it, why do we disagree?
Because I'm labeled woke a lot of times. And I'm like, I don't even know why.
But not by us. We haven't labeled it.
It's because it's like as soon as you say you're for trans rights, you know, or you know.
Whoa. What, number one, Will's for trans rights. And number two, what does trans rights mean?
For trans rights.
Okay. What? He talks about it all the time.
Very quickly, it depends what you mean by rights.
But
what do you mean by trans rights?
I don't think anyone opposes trans people voting or getting.
Yeah, let us. Let her tell us what she means by trans rights.
Yeah,
tell us what you mean by trans rights.
I think it's multifold. I mean, there's so much in there, right? So when you think about trans,
Tam, stop.
No, I'm trying
I love
to it.
That you have to. We can't have a back and forth because you're just speaking in hypotheticals and generalities. And I need your. We don't have to speak for the whole other Democrats. Forget about them. This is the Tam show. Tell me what you believe trans rights mean.
I believe that trans rights means equal protections for trans women, you know, as if they are women. And down the line, sports, prison, spaces, like everything, you know, and that's not, and then it's like, well, you're woke because you believe that. It's like,
no, let's get rid of the woke. But it's not that you're woke for believing it, but if I agree, let's say you gave me 5 things that you think trans rights mean, and I agree with 3 of them, because I disagree with the other 2, that makes me a far-right zealot?
I didn't say that.
No, I'm asking a question. I didn't say you said that. It's a question.
No, I don't think it makes you a far-right zealot.
Okay, so you say that Will is not pro-trans rights. Will, tell us your stance on transgender people.
I mean, yeah, sure. It seems like maybe we should pick out a couple topics and kind of break them down and toss back and forth. But like, if this is the first one, so I think at a certain level, obviously, so sex is biological. And it's not especially difficult to define. An ex-partner and one of my good buddies is a biologist. And like, the wonky definition she would use is that among like montreme mammal predators, someone who's a female is someone that has the reproductive system that's associated with the production of a few large rather than many small gametes. Gametes being eggs, sperm, so on. And that correlates with a bunch of other things. Like the correlation between that and having a non-XY chromosome, like not necessarily not being intersex, but being male, the correlation between like the female reproductive system and the XY chromosome is like 100%. Literally. Like you can be intersex maybe, but you can't be male and be female. And I mean, like if you actually go to a biology conference, I mean, there are all sorts of things like, you know, enhancing the reproductive possibilities of panda bears or something like that. That, by the way, panda bears have trouble fucking, apparently. Like, it's very hard to get them aroused. This is an issue for zoos. We don't need to go into it. But, like, that's an actual paper that this person, a friend of this person, worked on. So, like, it's just accepted that sex exists. It's this thing. They're things like the way sex smells to both sexes that arouse people, that tie into sex. So
what about
gender
the rights,
is something that... Well, I'm going to get to that in a second. I'm not just going to talk about panda bears and sex. Gender is a concept that was basically made up in the 70s by John Money and Judith Butler that is not totally invalid, but it's the idea that you feel masculine or feminine to a certain extent. You perform sexuality. And this to some extent is obviously true. Like I'm... wearing a blazer and silver chain and a bunch of other bro male crap. Like, I could easily change my appearance. There are societies where I could probably be perceived as female if I shaved, for example, this sort of thing. The bald head's not a sign of masculinity in part of the world. But anyway, gender is the idea that you perform the roles associated with sex. The issue with the modern trans movement is that people aren't saying, I demand civil rights, i.e. voting, or even I demand protections from bullying. The idea is that your gender identification should equal your sex, essentially. So when Tam says, like, I support full liberty for trans women, this is where you're asking how I feel about trans rights. I think trans people should have essentially the same rights as everyone else, But the idea that if you identify as female in gender terms, you should go to a women's prison if you're a rapist, again, strikes me as simple lunacy. Like the idea there, I think, is that it's more important not hurt people's feelings, but it's more important to accommodate people psychologically than it is to maintain a certain level of safety or social order or something like that. I basically just disagree. Like, when I talk to feminist friends about this, like sports, for example, they'll often just legit say, like, you were a jock, I wasn't. I don't care much about sports. Will, you don't watch women's swimming either. Let's don't pretend you do. Like, it's more important that trans people feel healthy and accommodated than that biological women win. I think that's kind of nuts. Like, I don't think you need to accommodate people's individual perceptions of who they are at the level of social order. Last sentence for me. But if I went to dinner with someone who ID'd as trans, of course I would call them Jane or whatever the case might be, because I'm not an asshole, at least on this topic. But in terms of the idea that Jane could enter a contest designed to identify the best, like, minority female scientist, that would strike me as absolutely nutty, because Jane's not female. There are mental differences on average between men and women that would probably give Jane the edge there. So I support trans rights in the sense no one can abuse you, you can vote, you can do anything any other citizen can. But no, like, if I say I'm 52, to give the classic example, I don't get to retire from KSU today. That's nonsensical.
Tamika, do you have any points you want to make about her beliefs?
No, I totally agree with what Will was saying. When she talked about she believes if someone feels like a woman when it comes to sports and prisons and things like that, I totally disagree with that, because even as we see this William, who is swimming with the women, I do think that there are biological differences that would give William the edge up on the females in the pool. And I just don't think that that's fair. Even when it comes to prisons, I don't think if you're still walking around with a penis, but you feel like a female, you should be able to go into a women's prison. I just don't think that. Now, I do think that there are people that have gone so long as women, had the surgery. I'm thinking of, I think her name is Janet Moss or something like that. If Janet were to go and get in trouble right now, it would be hard for me to see Janet going to a male prison. She has lived as a female for so long, and she's had all of the necessary surgeries and hormones, and, so I think that I would be okay with that. But when somebody is like in the situation of William Thomas, I just think that's absolutely wrong. And I do not think we should be pushing that on children. So whatever adults, decide to do, like when Bruce decided to be Caitlyn, I had no issue with that. No problem at all. But I do think that when you're halfway and you haven't decided to go all the way, or if I have to think now that you are a female just because you feel like a female, I don't agree with that. And you don't get to, if you don't have a uterus, or, you don't have the reproductive organs that would consider you a female, you are just not a female. And I don't feel like I should have to honor that. Like Will was saying, I'm not an asshole. Well, yeah, I am. But I try not to be. And so I like Blair White. I call Blair Blair. We get along fine. And but Blair is not a woman.
Yeah, one very final point about this. A lot of people on the political left seem to have trouble defining what a woman is. Like, the last time I actually offered a cash prize on Twitter and Insta, it was for this. It was like, well, you say that a woman is someone who identifies as a woman. What are they identifying as? And it went into just this whole cycle of nonsense where people would say things like, well, a woman is not someone with a vagina, usually called something more pungent, and, an XY chromosomal order, and, this and that. A woman is someone who identifies as a woman and knows that they live with female knowledge. And it would just get back to the question, well, what are they identifying as? And the only answer that I could really get out of this is being a woman is having the set of sex stereotypes that we associate with being female and not male. So, like, people would say, like, I look beautiful, so I'm a woman. I dressed as a woman, so I'm a woman. One of these was, like, 17 tweets long, by the way. Didn't get the prize, but I respected the effort. But, I mean, each one of them was just that sort of thing. Like, I am caring, so I'm a woman. I am soft and not hard, so I'm a woman, and so on down the line. And I think a lot of this is just, like, the stereotypes we had for men and women before people started talking about feminism. Like, I don't see that there's anything underlying that at all. Like, so, a woman is someone who's an adult human female.
Tam, I'm going to give you a couple minutes to respond, and the only thing I'm going to ask is you can respond to, either one of them or both. And then also my only question is, do you think that giving them the full protections that you're talking about, that it somehow hurts women or feminism?
No, I don't at all. And I think that, I have to not qualify it, but I have to explain that a little bit because it does play into this. And I know lived experience is not something that is data driven in some of your eyes. To me, it is. It drives data and it drives perception, right? So my aunt is 83, and she was one of the first 3 people in the United States to have gender reassignment surgery in the 60s and 70s in California. And I didn't know until I was 15, 16, that even happened. To me, she was always a woman. She was female. More importantly, she was a woman to me. And when I talked to her about, she's a professor, she's an activist, she's a writer, she's a genius, she's fucking amazing. And when I talked to her about everything that's going on, she's like, the trans right, it's like this has been going on for decades and decades and decades. The idea that like this is just like this is a hot topic now. She's like, we've been living like this for literally decades. And so I'm coming from that place, right, of like just seeing a full life, 83 years of a life, where she has been a woman and she has thrived in that capacity. But her surgeries were fucking awful. One of the first ones that she had was in the bowels of like San Quentin prison or like Folsom. It's like you had to go down to the basement. It was like you were getting a lobotomy, and it was really, 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 really violent surgeries on her body. And it hadn't been done, And so when we talk about puberty blockers or hormone blockers or, transitioning before puberty or getting it started, like the 3 or 4 years that it actually takes before, you go on to like more heavy hormone blockers, right? So talking about that, she's like, I'm happy. She's like, I'm happy that exists because it didn't when I was doing this. And there's so much unnecessary pain, psychologically and physically that people had to go through and that are still going through. And it's like, if there's something that someone can do to where they don't want to like, blow their brains out because, their suicide rate for people that are trans in the US is like peaking at like 51%, it's like, why not? And so when I think about that kind of informs my, like the idea of like women, trans women in women's spaces, because I saw her in women's spaces my whole life. And I think this goes to what Shamika's saying too. She knows somebody who she's like, I wouldn't want to see her go into a men's prison, like this is a fully developed trans person. Like, and I think that's the difference. Like, I think that's where we're getting kind of like stuck. It's like this new wave of like, oh my God, all these like young people are like have gender dysphoria and they're going to go like, cut their balls off or like have vaginoplasty or like whatever it is. And they're going to like fuck themselves up. But it's okay if someone's been that way for a while and they should be allowed to go into these spaces. Right. And so that's sort of curious to me. And I don't think it's so easy to transition from a male correctional facility like into a female one. There's fully transitioned people, trans women who are still waiting to be transferred into female prisons. It hasn't happened. And there is criterion, and it's a very specific criterion to be able to even do that. So I think it's the narrative's gotten so out of hand. It's like, oh, because I never said feel. That's not a word that I use. Like, because someone feels that they're...
You never said what again?
No, I didn't use the word feel. I heard that come up a couple times, like because a woman, someone feels like they're a woman, they should have these rights. Like it's not about feeling; it's about like that's who they are. Like they see themselves as a woman and they live their life.
But they see themselves.
But that's two different
Seeing
things.
yourself and feeling.
It doesn't make it a fact.
But they also live their lives as a woman, right? And so I think that there's a lot.
I live my life as a bird. It won't make me a bird, though. Is what I'm saying.
But
I actually think
what I'm saying. Like to me, it does. And I don't think that.
All right, I think we can put the trans issue to bed. I don't think you really gave your changed views of your specific, like laid out the point as to why it's important, why it doesn't hurt women. That it was more like my uncle.
No, that was
had
my
a sex
ad,
change and became your ad.
because the narrative has gotten
Right,
so far. No,
but it was a man who had. But I'm saying, but he transitioned to a woman,
you
right?
didn't listen then, because this is the thing. It's like you
So he wasn't born a man who transitioned to a woman.
it's not.
But you just said I'm just following up. You said I wasn't listening, and that's not what happened.
Then you didn't hear what I said, so I'm trying to clarify. So it's not about like a bunch of people are like, I'm a fucking rapist, so I'm gonna like try to pull one over and get transferred into a women's prison. So
that kind of does happen with the women's prison situation.
I didn't say anything about a bunch of people. I was asking about the person in your family.
Fear. I'm saying that that's what has happened, right? It's like this fear that women are going to be replaced by trans women and that they're going to go into these spaces.
No. There's not a fear that they can replace us at all because they're not.
Wait a minute, Tam.
Okay, guys, a lot of this just seems to be really kind of empirically measurable. I want to hear what Tam has to say, but I mean, like, in terms of the women or the people that ID as trans in women's prison, they actually a lot of this you can just measure. Like, they looked at this in England, they found that something like an eighth of the prisoners were claiming they were female because there's a process by which you can transition into the women's units if you're female. So, like, with a lot of this, like, obviously at a certain level, if you're male, you're not female. The question is how to politely accommodate the psychological perceptions people have or something like that.
But that's not even the problem. I asked her a specific question and she went to prisons in order to obfuscate the where did she go? See, you scared her away. No, yeah. I'm assuming she dropped.
I mean, I'm pretty sure she'll be back.
I'm assuming she dropped. Because we got to get to other issues, so we've been spending 20 minutes on trans. I wanted to talk about race. That would be really interesting to get that piece.
Pam's back.
Yeah, I know. It happens.
I have a quick question. What's
what you said? Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Shamika.
Okay, so I think we're moving on to the next issue, but one of my comment pretty much like could be cut and pasted from show to show, and it's just sort of like, what are the numbers on that? So, like, I don't think there are a whole bunch of trans rapists running around through locker rooms or something like that. I also think if you tell men in male correctional facilities they can go to female correctional facilities if they identify as a woman, like the Brit case, a whole bunch will. So a lot of this, I mean, like the puberty blockers thing, the argument, if you talk to someone who's a trans advocate, is, well, we're actually not doing the surgery on these little kids, by the way. You can start at like 12 to 14. We're putting them on PBs, and then they can make their own decision. But if you talk to like Abigail Schreier, or for that matter, any of the left-wing psychologists that responded to her, no, but I mean, like I've talked to both. I mean, the actual fact is that if you don't put kids on puberty blockers, like 80% of girls specifically who are gender flex for a while just go on to become gay or bisexual women, which is extraordinarily common. Like last I looked, like 40% of women ID is bi, like 2% were lesbians. So if you put kids on puberty blockers, though, the percent that transition, according to like Schreier and the response, is 100, basically. It's like 90 something, because there are these dramatic changes to your body. Like you don't start female puberty, you don't get your period, so on. So I think that's bad. Like unless you can actually change sex, which you can't, you can have whatever identity you want, but it's probably a good idea to not encourage people to get this irreversible surgery at, what is it, 15 for top surgery? So I think, again, my only point is just like, what is the reality underlying this? Like, someone has to have looked at whether you're more likely to be sexually abused in, prison acts as a trans woman as versus, like, committing a crime in a women's prison. I'd be curious what the numbers are.
Tamika, you had a question, and then we got to move to the next topic.
My question was just that she said the criteria was very difficult. I wanted to know what's the criteria for a trans to identify as a woman to go into a women's prison?
I mean, it goes state by state, really. I know in California, each case is decided completely separately. And it's so how long has, what's the medical history? Like if there is a trail of medical history, what sort of interventions have already been put in place? There's independent psych evaluations, in-house psych evaluations, and then it's processed over a period of time, or not processed, but check-ins again and again and again. And so even when you are fully transitioned, like if you go that route, it's still really, really hard. So it's not like, it's not as easy as I think. I'm not saying all of you are saying this, but this is what I hear a lot is like the talking point, like why, what are we afraid of, and it's like women getting raped in women's spaces, or it automatically goes to like pedophilia, associated with trans people. But it's actually like there's a set criterion, and for puberty blockers too, and you have that flex window of it's actually like 4 years after you start on puberty blockers where it is reversible. It's when you start like the crazy ass hormone, blockers, that when you go a little bit older, that is different, it affects fertility for sure. But that's why, you can't even get the puberty blockers if you haven't already been like seeing somebody steadily for like a set amount of time. And it's usually like at least a couple of years, if not more.
So there are men with vaginas in the men's prison. Are we saying that?
They're trans, yeah. Fuck.
You're on mute, Will.
Yeah, and I think and it's like
I know he was. We got to move. We can't stay on this. We can't.
I just want to hear what you have to say.
Normally go to men.
Tam, tell us what we're wrong about the race question. Education, CRT, about policing, whatever you want to do. What do we get wrong about race in America?
It's not about getting it wrong. And that's like something that I wanted to say, because it's like, why do I listen to your show? I mean, I think that would have been a good way to start this conversation, right? So that it's not so volatile, because that's definitely not the way that I wanted it to be. And I already like feel myself like being defensive, and I don't want to be. I want to be open, and it's like, yeah, I'm a little bit of a masochist for sure. And like, I think part of listening to the show is like a little bit of doom scrolling on my part. But it's actually like, when I really thought about it, I'm like, I want to understand, like, not just what people think, but why they think it and what influenced that thinking. So what were the
so what do you disagree with?
Interior like factors that went into that thinking? And I actually watched the pilot episode for your show, a while back, which is why I love Shamika so much, because we disagree, but you're so authentic with your truth. Like you were like, I want to get fucking naked. Well, you didn't say fuck, I said fuck, but you're like, I want people to get naked, like the naked truth, and like to actually put it all out there, and I think when we start just like getting defensive or getting, riled up, it's like, I know for me, I just stopped listening. And so I was listening to your show, and it was fucking hard for like the first 5 episodes that I listened to. I was just like, oh, Jesus Christ. But I kept doing it. And it's because I want to find those ways that we actually do like agree and like connect, right? Where there's space, because it would bring it, it's like, I want to like not be so divided. And it's not this.
But Tam,
it's just,
let me ask you to pause just for a minute though.
I think for like, I actually listened to your show, and that Peter B guy, I can't, his last name.
Oh, Peter Boghossian?
Yeah, I mean that one. I think that one like was the hardest one for me to listen to, and it's like,
what was the one you got the most
that one
agreement or most positives from?
Tucker.
Oh fuck no, I didn't even listen to that one, but
he knew that when he said that, by the way.
No, and the Peter one, like it was like a negative, positive, negative, like up and down thing for me, where I was like, that was an opportunity right there to like actually show some fucking integrity, and you missed it, dude. And I felt like that's the whole premise of this show, right? Is to like find solutions, to like find those ways where it's like you can admit that like maybe you have more room to grow in that area, or that someone has a good point, you know, and like let's work on that. He said something like you have to also, having these impossible conversations, like you also have to be able to not just change people's minds, but to change your own mind and to like allow space for that to happen. But he didn't give any examples of like when he actually, like he had experienced that, right? And so I felt like he could, but that would be like, he's too much of an egomaniac to like actually do that. And I feel like that is the problem. And a lot of what we're talking about is just plain ego.
But
Before we get that's why I listen to your show and I'm.
But hold on, Tam. but I don't. You know, I make it a point not to really be argumentative. In fact, I just got attacked on the trans thing. This is literally I got attacked. What'd you say?
This is the most argumentative, Charles, that I have ever seen you on the show.
But see, this is what's frustrating me. I don't want to argue with you. I only get. But Tam, you keep doing it.
See, now you're not.
Stop.
Oh, you're patronizing me, and that sucks.
I'm not patronizing.
Yeah, you are.
I'm asking.
You gotta be okay with like the neurodivergent thinker. It might take me a second to get to my point, and I might do it in a different, non-clipped way.
That's fine, but you have to. But there's a limited time for the show, right, and you have to let me finish what I'm saying. But you're talking while I'm talking. It's bad for the audience. They can't hear us every time. You're still doing it.
What's the question right now?
Yeah.
It's not a question. I'm simply saying that she said that we're being defensive. It's because you're not talking about a topic. I said, right? So I would ask you something, and you would reply about something. We're not debating your feelings or your issues. It's like, tell us what you think about this.
I have been, but I was saying,
and you're replying about
being defensive too, Charles. See, that's what I'm trying to talk about. Like I was saying, I wasn't saying you.
No, I know you're not that. I'm frustrated because we're not staying on topic. I mean, I really don't care what your answers are. I want people to hear them, and they're fine. But I will ask you, like I started this question 4 minutes ago, asking about race, and you talked about why you listen to the show, and so it goes off on this tangent, right? So I just like
So the baseline question is, what Tam thinks we're wrong about when it comes to race?
Yeah, I want to know her thoughts on race and how they differ.
Talk about race. I said I was going to talk about education, but that's a shift. What do you want to know?
But you talked about CRT, and isn't that whole debate about race?
CRT. Not really.
So you have.
I mean, no. I mean, I think there's just a movement in public education that's like, hiding behind this idea of like wanting more freedom of speech, but it's actually like the antithesis of that. And I think.
And who wants more freedom of speech?
Parents.
Is it the teachers, the parents?
I think the policing of teachers is like, it's sad. And I mean, I'm an educator. That's what I do. It's what I love, And I wouldn't want to be an elementary school teacher, or a middle school teacher, or a high school teacher. And I mean, I know Will's got to feel this on some level because we, kind of talked about it. It's like this idea that you need to post your entire like lesson plans online, and have them approved by parents. It's like, that's just nuts to me.
They have to do that? My teacher doesn't do that.
But that's what they're asking for. It's like this group of mama bears coming out of like, Fairfax, Virginia, and defending ed. And it's like, it's who's going to want to teach if that's the situation. It's like the idea that here's a curriculum, you can get it online. It's citywide, it's district wide. You can see what's being taught, but how they teach it, like the assignments, those are fluid. Like, I don't think I've ever set a syllabus, whether I was teaching like special ed kids in, like an ICT class or at NYU. Like, I've never set the syllabus. It's like, this is what they need to know and learn, curriculum guidelines, but how I do that is my business. And so that to me was sort of like the beginning of like this interest in like, what exactly are these mama bears doing? And like, it's.
And what is it that you think they're doing?
Kind of ugly. I think that they're, this idea of like our children being indoctrinated. Like, I don't like that word, and I don't think that that's actually what's happening. So I haven't seen it. And I think to not be able to, like, what's the big deal of using pronouns? Like, who gives a shit? And it's like most of my friends, like the people I know that are like, gay, like they knew they were, not talking about sexual orientation. It's like, 7 and 8 year olds can't talk about that. Like, my friends knew they were gay when they were like 4 or 5 years old. It's like, it's just kind of like this prudish thing, and it's like to try to just let them use their goddamn pronouns. Like, what's the big deal? Like, we don't have to teach gender ideology. Like, we don't have to talk about gender diversity or like whatever you want to talk about. But it's like just like recognizing like, hey, that person's like, that person's gay, or that kid identifies as trans, or like whatever. It's like I don't see. This
that's not
whole
the
like
issue.
grooming thing. Oh, their teachers are groomers. It's like, no, it's like, I'd rather like, how is a kid going to learn if they're fucking depressed every day? It's like,
but that's not that's not the issue. But it's not. They're not a bunch of parents going around saying we're upset because they want to use pronouns. That's not true. It's much deeper than that. But the bigger thing is the most consistent thing I'm seeing is that you have an extreme care for people, obviously, that you think are being treated unfairly, people that are marginalized, minorities in different ways, which is obviously a good thing. But what I find a lot in people who focus so much on those people is that they do it to the level that they ignore all the other groups. So like when you just said, I got friends who were gay and they knew they were gay or 7, right? And I totally believe that. I do too. But I think that in that class of 30, you're ignoring the other 28 kids if there's 2 kids that are gay there. So you're basically saying that class and how it addresses sexual orientation or any of these types of topics needs to address it from the standpoint of the 2 kids as ignore the majority because it will make those 2 kids more comfortable with their orientation. Am I wrong about assessing what you think about?
Well, it's like why can you say you're straight but you can't say you're gay?
Who said you can't say you're gay?
I'm just saying this. It's like it's not about a comfort level. It's just like,
yeah, but you can say you're gay though. No one's saying you can't.
I know. I'm just kind of referring to
okay.
what you just said in terms of sexual orientation. It's not teaching about sexual orientation. It's just like allowing that to like be natural. Like if a kid,
right. It should be. You're right. You're right there.
Yeah.
But should a teacher ask a kid his sexual orientation?
It's not grooming. That's the thing.
Right.
No.
I'm not saying it's grooming, but should a teacher ask a kid his sexual orientation?
Absolutely not. And I think that if the student offers that, like, then that's not something that, that's fine.
Right, but you agree that they shouldn't just ask the kid.
But why would you ask them on their sexual? I don't ask. I had a.
But they do.
I mean, I had a kid come to a job interview today at NYU. I can't ask him any of that stuff. I can't even ask him about like his family plans. I can't even ask him what he did on the fucking weekend. But like, I wouldn't ask a child like their sexual orientation. But it's like just to like. If a kid knows that it's a place, like kids are perceptive, they're like really perceptive. And it's like, if they know that it's like, it's okay and it feels okay, like they're going to feel a lot like ready, more ready to like be in that space and to actually learn. And it's like a lot less depressed.
Last thing, and I'm going to go to Will because Will wants to say something. But you said you didn't want to talk about race, but a lot of what the people are complaining about is also race. They're saying my kid is being, forced to admit to some, oppression that he didn't play part in. He's being forced to talk about these things in certain ways that makes him feel guilty or basically separates the races and things of that nature. So where that's happening, do you think that is wrong? Obviously, it's not happening in every school district, but a lot of the parents who are speaking up about this stuff, the mama bears you speak of, are speaking out because that's happening. So, one, if it's happening, do you think it's okay? And then, do you even believe it's happening?
I mean, what do you mean? What's the it that is happening? Like,
telling a 12-year-old white kid that slavery's bad, all this stuff, which is true, and then saying you own a part of that. As a white person, you have this special privilege that these black kids in the class don't have. You need to own up to that privilege.
Well, I wouldn't. I mean, I would address that differently. I wouldn't say you. I would say that they're
right. So if a parent, the kid did say you, and you got upset.
No, I think that talking about racism is like we should. I don't think that it's a topic to like steer away from at all. And it's like, my kid learns all this stuff in his school, PS3, and it's like, he doesn't feel guilty or shitty. He's just like, he kind of already knows this stuff, So I think that you don't tell a kid they're the oppressor or they're privileged or they're this or they're that. It's like, but
if they do, you would say that's wrong.
Yeah. I mean, I think you can't, I don't think that you should tell a student directly, You are the oppressor, right? You can look at a system, you can look at institutions, you can look at it.
So you think they should teach that the system and the institution is racist?
It's racist and classist, and there's some other shit thrown in. You know, it's like address, you not teach it, but like talk about it, right? It's not like that's the indoctrination part. It's like if you even talk about a story or a material or something, you know. And
No.
Let me just finish.
We're saying if you say the system marginalizes blacks, can they teach that the system today marginalizes and oppresses black people? Can they teach that?
Why not?
Okay. Will, you?
But that's
Yeah, I mean, I like, you know, looking at the current affirmative action edge in Kentucky today for one of my projects, I'm not too sure that most systems, if you're talking about college admissions or hiring or something like that, marginalize and oppress blacks. But my comments were actually a while back, because we've been talking for a little bit here. I think that it's true that the parental backlash to what's going on in schools can go too far. I mean, when you see people banning, like, Mouse, the comic book, although that's not exactly what happened, that's a little crazy. But I think that there's a really obvious reason that this is happening, and that's that under COVID, a lot of ordinary middle-class parents, and this includes a lot of black parents, got to look at what their kids are actually learning in mainstream. Yeah, Charles, you were one of them. You had a pretty eloquent piece about this. Shamika, in mainstream educational institutions. And I mean, it's when you look at most urban schools, like one of the most widely used curricula in the schools is Howard Zinn's, whatever it's called, you know, the People's
America,
Curriculum, 1619 Project, and our own friendly rival over at 1776 has a curriculum targeted at all grades, which argues one line is everything unique about America came out of slavery, you know, Indian immigration. I'm sure there's some kind of link put in there. But I mean, I think that, and this is an offshoot of something that a lot of very serious people talk about, which is that leftists in the 60s realized that their route to power as a pretty marginalized group in the U.S. overall was to kind of control discourse. And they sort of did. If you look at secondary education, higher education, the media, so on down the line. And you see these crazy figures every time we look at those arenas that we're almost used to hearing now. But like Pew, you know, 2004, 93% of mainstream media journalists are leftist liberals or left-leaning moderates. I had an argument online with Rod Graham, who we've all talked to recently, and I pointed out that, like, in sociology, it seems that it's like 100% liberal among the faculty members. Neither of us, and I think we're both being pretty good faith, can identify a Republican. You know, pretty major field there. So I think in secondary ed, it's not quite that bad. But people saw the 1619 stuff and, you know, CRT, whether or not by that label, and got angry about it. And I tend to side with the parents. In terms of, one of the issues here, though, kind of last thing, is the extreme dishonesty on all sides. So, like, the don't say gay bill thing, this is just an arena that's been filled with the most complete kind of bullshit. Like, I actually read the legislation, and what it prohibits is talking about it's instruction, first of all, which we all know is a term of art. I mean, there are like 2 or 3 teachers on the panel. It's like actual instruction about, like, sexual intercourse, sexual orientation, or gender identity under 3rd grade. So this would be like pre-K, K1 and 2. I mean, so the question comes up, like, when would a teacher need to do a full-on lesson about, say, anal sex in 2nd grade? Like, it might not be the case that's classic grooming, but it's really weird. And you do sometimes get into stuff beyond that. Just real quickly in downloads, where's the sexy summer camp flyer? No, like in Kentucky, this actually became a national story because it was so ridiculous. But we have this pretty big, this is like the 2nd or 3rd time this has been done. It's sex-positive sex ed, so it's the sexy sex ed summer camp. Mm-hmm. This is targeted at kids from like 7 up. And like these are some of the sessions, like July 6th, sex with me, self-pleasure, how to play with it. July 8th, reproductive health, the basics. July 13, gender diversity. July 20, let's talk about sex. That's not too wild. July 22, over-sexualization and the policing of blackness, black bodies, and how to have fun. August 3rd, pelvic floor health is for everyone. Tighten it up.
Face, I love it.
Now,
those darn
August
mama
5th.
bears
And by the
complaining
way,
about
like
that
a lot
shit.
of this stuff, like I mean, do your Kegel, both sexes, nothing wrong with it. But it's weird to target that at 8 or 9-year-olds. Like what? I'm not done with this. August 5th, the 3 P's: piss, poop, and pleasure. I mean, so like this is a pretty major event that
It's real,
occurs
man.
down here in the Red State Bluegrass. And I mean, I added 1 or 2 words to some of those, but I'll send you all this after the show. I think a lot of parents saw some of this stuff, and sure, that's at like the 98% margin right there. Like that's not very typical. But people saw this stuff. They saw that Howard Zinn is the most assigned book, and they said no. So you have to regulate the movement that's saying no. But I'm less worried about that than I am about like sexy sex ed summer camp. Let's pick one more title at random.
Uh-oh.
Oh, okay. August 12th. No, actually, let's go with August 10th. Sex on drugs, licit and illicit. That is, again, an important topic.
That sounds like a Will thing to write.
No, I mean, there's nothing wrong with sex on licit and illicit drugs once you are past the age of 18. But, I mean, but when people look at this stuff, it's important to realize, so, like, I am probably to the left of 60% of actual Americans. Like, it's important to realize what the actual population of the USA is. White, black, Pakistani, Native American, whatever. Like, for the majority of people, the idea of talking about whether a male could decide to become a woman voluntarily would just seem like lunacy. It would be on par with, like, Santeria voodoo. So I think when parents started seeing this stuff, which is a step beyond that, like, what's the one after pelvic floor health is for everybody? July 29th, self-managed abortion info share. Self-managed is really the catchword there, because abortion is legal in Louisville and up in the hills. You don't have to go to the closet.
Shamika's trying to do all the math to get there.
I think the one that weirds me out the most is piss, poop, and pleasure for the kids. I mean, but anyway, and I guarantee I'm going to totally send you this. This is not something the right is making.
See that? That's so.
She's like, I don't want to see that.
I don't have images of kids doing this. If they did, I certainly wouldn't have downloaded it. But I mean, the point is, like,
the FBI might be coming to your house.
No, big data is way stupider than you think. I have Tor on my computer. But although my personal tastes are, pretty vanilla and chocolate. But anyway, the basic point of all this is that when you see this once or twice in any of the red states, I'm not surprised by the mobs movement at all. Do we need to rein them in a little bit? Yeah, but the reason people are backlashing to 1619 is not shocking. It's because it's not true. It's weird. That's the same thing as a reaction to sexy summer camp. Who thinks that up?
Yeah, that takes a special kind of person. Well, I don't want to. I hate to cut it short. We're at an hour, and normally we end, but we can't now because I can't leave without you talking about. Because I can't leave without you talking about criminal justice.
Why is it?
Because that's like your the topic. What'd you say?
You can just get pissed. I've never seen you this pissed before. It's like you're on fire tonight. I love it.
Charles is like leaning in.
Yeah. And
I am not.
Shamika's been so gracious. Like usually I'm in my kitchen and I literally I'm like, oh fuck, Shamika's coming on. Shamika's gonna come on with her one-liner, and I have to hold the counter in my kitchen and cross my legs and hunch down so I don't fucking pee, because I know it's gonna be I'm gonna be like, that shit was so fucked up that she just said, but I cannot not laugh. I cannot not laugh.
We need a photo of that the next time it happens, and maybe she'll get you on this one. I want to know who's supposed to
send the picture to sexy summer camp.
Yeah, right. I think this is
funniest Shamika. No,
I mean, this is
actually. I'll let Shamika decide what the funniest Shamika comments were. Well, Shamika and Tam, but there's some classics out there. Hand and Knee is still my favorite.
Hand and Knee, but Hand and Knee wasn't on the show though. That was on Kill Me.
Yeah, but you had me on the first pilot episode. Yeah. And that's what I'm looking for in this show, I think,
Shamika, you
start here.
You got to bring it up a notch, Shamika.
In all fairness, Charles, you've pretty much been the one tonight. So I have to agree with Tam. You've been on fire. You've been a different Charles than you.
It's only because she was talking while others were talking. When we play this back, people are going to be like, I can't hear it.
Okay.
Will look shot. I'm telling you, I monitor this stuff. Every time me or you were talking, she was also talking. So I'm like, I can't hear what's going on. That's all it was. I don't care about the crazy, man. Say what you want to say. No, everybody out of jail. I'm sorry, go on.
I'm not crazy. I mean, everyone's a little crazy. I didn't say everybody should get out of jail.
No, I'm saying who should be in jail.
People should be.
We're both in New York.
I mean, I think that it's like where I think it differs a little bit. You know, the narrative is that diversion programs don't work, but it's like diversion programs. It's like there's a ton of different levels of diversion programs at every step of the criminal justice, like kind of journey. There's like pre-trial, pre-detention, post-conviction, even before, like a police level, like letting you, go before, like community-based diversion programs. And you have mental health court, you have juvenile court, and to me, it's like once you're like a juvenile and you go, like, I think juvenile, like, detention centers are the worst. I think they're horrific. And I think that if we can figure out a way to like not for kids not to just go into the system, like once you go in, it's really hard to get out, even if you physically get out. It's That's like true. It really does.
See, we agree.
And I think that, it's like this like weird thing I saw on Twitter today, 83-year-old serial killer, like released on after 50 years in jail, like kills a third victim and, all of this stuff. And I was like, yeah, that guy should have never, or it was a trans woman actually. So it was like,
I thought you were going to say should never be in jail.
Double get like trans woman and released from bail. It was like everything they were waiting for. But it was like that person should have never gotten out of jail the second time. Like I don't believe in that. Like it's like this person killed two people like really fucking brutally, really brutally.
Oh, so you saying they shouldn't have gotten out?
They shouldn't have gotten out of jail. Like there's no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
because I just think some people think that that I guess. I'm just kind of confused, not with you, but just from a criminal justice thing, between the violent and nonviolent, like whether nonviolent offenders shouldn't go to jail, and then what a nonviolent, like all the stuff we're seeing in New York lately, a lot of people that I know still consider that stuff nonviolent. That's the reason why I talked about Alvin Bragg, not because, like he literally said, he's a prosecutor, he literally said if you pull a gun on a guy but you don't shoot him, that's not violent. I simply disagree. I don't think that's political. I don't think that makes me disagree with people who think there's too many people in jail. But come on, you don't get to walk around the street pulling guns on people.
No, you don't.
True.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And I think that the sooner you realize that, like the better off you're going to be, in terms of the system. I mean, it's just so hard to get out, but the things that I do think need to change are like really funding diversion programs and understanding which ones work, which are good models and which ones don't. And it's like the further down, like the chain you get in diversion, like the less chance of it being successful, so it really is like those first few steps of the program. And it's like, I have, really, really super close loved one who's been in jail for 4 years without a trial or a plea deal, and can't make bail.
And if you've seen the show, I talk about that. That is probably the thing that bothers even more than juvenile people sitting in jail.
Bad.
Hey, you're gonna arrest me? You give me my speedy trial.
And if you can't, his bail is $1 million. It's like, and it's like he's had 3 shitty public defenders who keep changing over, and it's like he's just sitting there, and he's really mentally ill. And he hasn't been convicted of a crime. So when I think about when I think about bail reform, I think about things like that. It's like who is sitting in jail right now for years on end because they can't make bail. And so I think it's a problem of like the public defender's office. I think they're so overworked and overburdened.
Yep, not enough people.
Right. Yeah, and it's like nothing goes to trial, and it's like, and that's the same thing that's played out with my loved one. It's like he thought he was was going to have a trial this whole time, and I'm like, they're going to plea you out, like 97% of the cases in this country, and like you better take it, and that's just the way it is, and it shouldn't be that way. It's like, no. And he's seen his PD like maybe twice in a year.
Mm-hmm. So, Shanika, I'm starting to think that other than her being absolutely wrong on the trans thing, that we don't disagree on everything, do we?
No, I don't think we disagree on everything, but I do think on the things that we disagree on, we disagree. And so I would say that I enjoyed this conversation, but I will say that, Tam, you're a perfect example as to why I would give up my right to vote to take your right to vote and get back in the kitchen, because you are very empathetic. And I just think that has
sweet
really
person
took America to shit. That whole, woo-woo.
Oh my God, is it Shamika or Jesse Kelly?
I don't think I'm
pretty similar.
nice, though. I mean, I think I can't be that nice if my views on criminal justice are closer to more conservatives, actually. It's like the trans issue, but I don't think like the rest of it, no. It's just, I'm not soft. I'm sorry.
You come across very empathetic and loving.
I'm empathetic, but I'm empathetic with I'm also a realist. It's like if you do something.
You just said a man can be a woman if he says so.
You need either if you can't get the help, then you need to you can't just run around on the street. The problem is for me, it's a mental health crisis. And I think that we need to do better. We need to do better. When you have 75% of the guys at Men's Central in the Orange County, California, the largest jail in California, and you have that high of a rate of mental illness, severe mental illness, there's a problem. There's a problem. But I'm not that soft, Shamika. You just don't know me yet.
So what can we do better going forward? Cut the bull a better podcast.
Have more conversations like this.
They don't come on.
Well, I'm here.
Where Charles will rant for a whole hour? No thanks.
I mean, but it shows how hard it is to talk. When you really feel strongly about something, and so I think it's I'm calmer now. You got to kind of work through that, and I think we worked through it pretty quickly.
Well, I'm going to ask all the viewers/listeners, however you listen to the show, to assess this. I know I'm going to lose, but I don't see it. I'm going to go back and watch it. But I still feel I saw Will's face. I already lost Will. He disagrees with me. We know Tam doesn't. And Shamika just said she disagrees with me. I was not upset. I really don't get bothered by anybody's views. My issue was all the talking at the same time. That was it. Say what you want to say, but not while Will is talking or while I'm talking, because then we can't hear. That's all. I wasn't riled up. I knew some of your views before. That's not an issue. It's just I wanted to hear them.
And one thing just to really quickly say before we end, Shamika, I'm a feminist, and that means that if you want to be in the kitchen, if you want to be home with your kids, if you want to be a homemaker, if you want to serve your man, you know what? I want to I support that. It's wherever you want to be. If you're choosing to be there, that's what feminism is for me. It's every woman has a right to choose what she wants to do and how she wants to do it. So we didn't get to talk about feminism, but my brand is very different. And I actually get a lot of shit for saying things like that. I also think you should get fucking paid for it. But that's getting into some socialist shit, so we can save that for another time. No, it's wages for housework. I mean, it's, it's an old theory that's kind of, it's like a woman's worth, it's sort of it is a job.
Shamika, you okay with that?
Real, it's and I'm being, a little bit I'm not, whatever.
I don't know if I think women should get a choice. I do think if you decide to marry and have children, I think your husband and your children should be your first choice. I don't think your career
you made the choice when you got married.
And I respect that, and I will fight to the death for you to have that, but it's that, and I will also fight for women to have, choose career first and to be the breadwinner and to have the stay-at-home dad, or to be a single mom.
That's bitch.
Well, as the feminist on the show, you want to have the last word, Will?
Well, I think, I don't know. I'm obviously the biggest feminist on the show. Men do everything better, blah, blah, blah. I don't really, I think that the soft thing is probably a good ending point. I think that varies among people. So, I personally, honestly, don't care at all about people I don't, A, know, and B, like, which actually extends to most, if not all of you guys. But, that's the reality, and I think anything beyond that would strike a lot of people, probably about half of men, if we're being honest, as a little soft. So the question is, who covers what's being done? So, Tam, I totally agree. There are a lot of mentally ill people that are being straight up abused in jail. Anyone that's ever spent a day in county jail knows that. But the question is what to do about it. Like, are you going to be hard and set up involuntary insane asylums again? It was the combined Reagan and the Democrats who, for different reasons, Reagan just didn't want to pay and the Democrats wanted to be kind, deinstitutionalizing mental patients that caused the urban homeless crisis. Like, I mean, when I went to visit buddies in that student land section of downtown Chicago when I was like 18 or 19, I mean, you'd see like classic schizophrenics walking around like shouting at themselves and me and motherfuckers that weren't there. And I mean, that's because of deinstitutionalization. So are we going to take those people and brutally lock them back up again? I wouldn't a second. But again, that's a choice someone has to make. Right. When it comes to sort of feminism supporting housework and so on, I love the idea of people deciding whether to work or stay home. But Uncle Sam's not going to pay you to stay home. Like, there's no government program that pays me for coaching Pop Warner football. So, I mean, at some point, like, individual people have to go out and aggressively make those decisions. Right. And I think that's where the right and the left often disagree. Right. And I could go on in a different direction, too, because part of the right is just the bought and owned subsidiary of large evil corporations owned by people far more predatory than us. But that's a different sideline. In the meantime, I mean, thanks to Tam for coming on. That's my final point.
Thanks, Will.
Well, she is Tamuira Reid. She is a liberal realist, a feminist, and associate professor of writing. Why are you laughing? You wrote this. I'm reading your script.
Arguing again?
Look, I can't even get the out without her talking. See? Proof.
I laughed.
To be fair, I was also
laughing at your
I know.
What'd you say, Will?
I said, to be fair, I was also talking.
Were you?
Yeah.
Are you done now, Will?
Well, yeah, I mean, I only had one thing to say. But I mean,
since you cut me off.
Yeah. Sexism, it's all around us. All right, guys.
Tam, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
Patriot J, I'm saving the day. Patriot J, I'm saving the day from you commies who let know you can't fuck with me. I got a country to save. God bless the US of A. Land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to save because I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the day.